dobili, pa nema potrebe da gubimo vrijeme na ponavljanje onoga što piše u programu. Ja bih samo rekao da ćemo danas pokušati raditi tako da kombiniramo red i disciplinu sa slobodom i komunikacijom. Znači, striktno ćemo se držati vremena izlaganja od 15 minuta, zato da bi svi sudionici imali jednaku poziciju u svojim prezentacijama i da bi imali vremena i prostora za pitanja i odgovore. Jer znate kako to ide s konferencijama, ako odmah na početku srušimo satnicu, onda je iza toga teško raditi. Evo, jutros imamo gospodu Rainera Münza iz Erste Group, pa bi molio gospodina Münza da dođe na pozornicu. Mr. Münz, would you join us at the floor, please? Gospodina Ivana Čipina sa Ekonomskog fakulteta Sveučilišta u Zagrebu, gospođu Petru Leroy-Čadovu i gospodina ministra profesora Miranda Mrsića. So, for the lectures, I was speaking Croatian, so you probably did not get it. Time is 15 minutes. 2 minutes before the end, I will announce that you have 2 minutes. And we'll be very strict about this. Thank you. Mr. Münz, would you please start?
Dobar dan, good morning. Let me just walk you through the issue of the day, of the morning session, which is demographic shock. And I think not everything that I'm going to tell you will be shocking, hopefully. So if you just look at the world trends, are you sure this is the right presentation? I'm sorry. I will just to check. Okay, we're just checking. Works. So we have 7 billion people living on our planet, and we are still in a very youthful world. Yeah, you don't see this when you are on holidays in Opatia these days. You wouldn't tell that this is a youthful world because it's a good time for retired people to go to the beaches now. But on average, the world population is young, and this has to do with the fact that we had plenty of children over the last decades. In 1999, we had 6 billion people living on our planet. Today it's 7 billion, so over the last 11 years of our lives, it has increased by 1 billion. And most of the additional people were born in Asia, lived there. So it's about 600 million people added to the Asian population, about 300 million added to the African population, and the contribution of Europe to these 7 billion is tiny. Just a few million people. We are still growing demographically, but this will soon come to an end, as I will show in a second. So there are 2 reasons why we are aging, and it's easy to understand. And one reason is we are having fewer children. So that's the number of children in the world that you see. There are still a few places with 5 or 6 children here. That's sub-Saharan Africa, plus Afghanistan here, a bit in Western Asia, but already half the world population live in areas where there are fewer than 2 children per family. And this is the reason why world population growth will come to an end in the 21st century, later down the road, because if you have fewer than 2 children per family, then the parent generation is not fully replaced by the children generation. Now, we don't see that yet because there are plenty of potential young parents because we had so many babies born in the recent past. But it will eventually come, and it will come. The younger ones here in the room will see it. So Croatia already is in this camp of less than 2 children per family. The other reason why we are aging is not fewer children, but more older people, and this is a good sign, basically. Often it's discussed as a problem, but I think firstly it's a good sign because it means our lives are becoming longer. So we have a high life expectancy, and the 2 oldest constituencies in the world is Europe on the one hand and Japan on the other hand, and here Croatia is in this, so a bit below the European average, but moving up. Now, speaking of shock, if you think that we are facing a shock, just look at the figures of China. What would the Chinese say if we think we are in a demographic shock? In China, over the next 38 years, the number of people above age 60 will triple. And I've just gotten you here the UK and the Chinese figure, population age 65. You see, it took the UK about 140 years to get from 5% of the population being above age 65 to 25%. The Chinese have to experience this in less than half that time. It will only take 60 years in China. Now, this might be bad news, but the good news is it will not destroy the Chinese pension system. Why? Because there is no Chinese pension system that can be destroyed by this aging. Yeah? So, which is one of the reasons of the economic imbalances in the world, by the way, because an average Chinese household is saving 40% of the disposable income every month, because they want to build a personal rainy day fund against the risks in life of becoming unemployed, becoming sick, losing jobs, and so on. So if the Chinese would introduce a European-style welfare system, probably they could also start consuming more because they wouldn't have to save that much. But that's not the topic of the day. Now, over the last 170 years, our life expectancy has been increasing constantly. We are skipping 2 world wars, apparently, with millions of deaths. But if you exclude these 2 world wars, you see it's a straight line going up. It's a straight line going up, and I've just plotted the best countries, the countries with the highest life expectancy. So those who had a lower life expectancy even had a steeper curve moving up to that line. Now comes the reason why it was worth that you have decided to come to Rovin to this conference. It's not only about this beautiful hotel and the networking possibilities and in between listening to a few speeches. That's the good news. That's the good news. If you're spending 2 days here in Rovin with us, your life expectancy will have increased by 12 hours. Today, tomorrow, every day. For the rest of my and your life expectancy will increase by 6 hours till that last day of your life when it ends. So let me just quickly rush to demographic trends in Europe. This is the European Union, plus hopefully in 8 months from now, including Croatia. When I was born in the 1950s, the average European was 30 years old. Over the last 58 years of my life, the average European has become 10 years older. Now, the average European, which does not exist, by the way, but is 40 years old. In only 38 years from now, I will be dead by then, but hopefully the younger people here in the room will remember this day, this conference, and particularly this one. The average European will be 50. And now, if you read something about aging in Europe, and basically it's portrayed as something negative, it's a gray mass rolling onto you. That's a wrong picture. You are the gray mass rolling onto something else, the next generation. Yeah? It's not something that rolls on you. You are rolling. We are part of this graying and aging population. Because in 38 years from now, guess what? You will be over 50, whatever your age here in the room is today. Yeah? So, for the rest of you and my life, this generation will increase, 60 plus, and this generation 60 minus will decrease. And by the way of decreasing, what we also see is, while the world population is still growing, we already see parts of the world starting to shrink. And particularly in Europe, particularly in Central and Southeastern Europe, in the successor states to the Soviet Union, the European ones at least, but also talking about Japan, about Korea, we see parts of the world that are already starting to shrink. It anticipates a trend that will be more general in the late 21st and in the 22nd century, when the world population will start to shrink as a whole. Now, one of the challenges of tomorrow is how to arrange for Europe that has not only an aging, but in certain areas also a shrinking population. Croatia is no exception if you look at the age distribution that Croatia is having, had in the past, is having today, and will have in the future. Clearly an aging situation. Now, what's the impact? I think there's an impact on labor markets. The reddish part of the map are places where the people, the domestic workforces will shrink, and the green parts is where the domestic workforces will increase, including high unemployment, political unrest. The Arab Spring, in part, is due to this green part of the map that you're seeing here, young, educated people who don't find a job. That's the difference it makes between Western Asia, South Asia, Africa, including sub-Saharan one, and the northern part of the Eurasian landmass from Lisbon to Yokohama. It will have implication on the pension system, which is not on the forefront of our discussion today. The dark blue is the pension expenditure today as percent of GDP, and the light blue one is what the European Commission expects and the OECD expect for 2050. And you see it's going to increase almost everywhere. So, challenge number one. Challenge number two, if you just take out quite a few, is about long-term care, which in most countries is not covered by health insurance. So we have to take care about that, and I hope there will be a discussion on this. Yeah. What shall we do? Let me end on that. What can we do? The first is an easy one. Let's just shrink in beauty. Venice, or you could say Dubrovnik, is a good place to discuss this. Why do we go to Venice? Most people don't know when they enter, but Venice has been the financial center of the world. The Wall Street, the City of London of the late Middle Ages and early modern time was in Venice. And then Venice disappeared from the map of the Atlantic economies, of the global trade. And so there was no capitalist destruction, there was no socialist destruction. It just became a museum. And today half the population of Venice is serving the tourists, and the other half are behaving as if they would be living there, because nobody wants to have spend a couple of days in a dead museum. You want to go to a living museum, right? So that's an option for Venice, that's an option maybe for Paris, that's an option definitely for Dubrovnik, but it's not an option for 500 million Europeans. You cannot make a living just by showing to the wealthy middle classes of tomorrow of India and China and Brazil how the former colonial powers did live. It's not exactly the future we want to have. Yeah, we want to have a different future. So that's a niche economy option, but it's not an option for